There's a lot of focus these days on how fast your site loads, especially since the emergence of smartphones. Search engines want to provide the best experience to their customers, and sending them to a page that takes an age to load is not a good experience. So this is why search engines are taking site loading time into account, especially on mobile searches when ranking pages. So in this lesson, we'll look at how you can measure your site's performance, add caching, and reduce the overall size of your pages. Another thing that search engines like is secure sites, and luckily we can easily add HTTPS by using Cloudflare. So you'll learn how easy it is to add your site to Cloudflare and make your site secure in just a few clicks. So to get started with all of this, you'll want to add your site to Cloudflare. So sign up for a free account on cloudflare.com and then you can start adding your websites. To do that, simply enter your domain name here and click the Begin Scan button. What Cloudflare will do is scan all of the DNS records for your domain name and attempt to duplicate those over to the Cloudflare servers. What we'll then need to do is update our DNS records for our domain name so that they point to the Cloudflare servers. Once this is done, all of the traffic to our website will go through the Cloudflare servers. And what this allows us to do is add caching and HTTPS via Cloudflare, rather than having to set it up on our own server. So once the scanning is complete, we'll jump in and start adding caching and HTTPS. So click the Continue Setup button, and you'll need to verify that all of your DNS records are listed below. If you're unsure about any of these details, please contact your hosting company and your domain name registrar for more details. However, for us, this is all correct, so I'll click Continue. And I'll choose the free website option and continue again. And finally, this is where we need to change the name servers for our domain. So I'm hosting with DreamHost, however I need to change to the Cloudflare name servers. So I'm going to copy these, go over to my domain and update the DNS records here. As I say, if you're unsure of how to do this, please contact your hosting company and domain name registrar. Once those name servers have been updated, it can take anything from a few minutes up to a few hours or even a day for you to see these changes take account. However, if we go back and click Continue, and Cloudflare will show us that the status is pending, but we can recheck the name servers at any time and it will update accordingly once those records have been updated. So I'll give this a few minutes and come back once the name servers have been updated. So now you can see that our site is now active on Cloudflare. We can get into adding HTTPS and caching. And it's really simple. To set up caching, click on the caching tab. And you have a few options here, such as the caching level. Most of these options I would suggest that you leave as the standard or the default option. Here you can set the browser cache expiration. Again, you can leave it at 4 hours. I like to set this to perhaps a few days, maybe 8 days, so I know that if I get frequent visitors to the site, a lot of the content is going to be cached for them. Now, depending on how frequently you update your site, you might want to set this to perhaps 1 or 2 hours, or even a month or 6 months. All depends on how regularly you think the pages on your site are going to be updated. As I say, 8 days will be fine for us. Next, there's an always online option. So this is great because if something happens to your hosting company's server and that goes down and it can't be connected to for some reason, Cloudflare will display their own cached version to any visitors. So that's a great free feature in Cloudflare. You can guarantee that your site will always be accessible. Next, there's a development mode. We won't concentrate on that for now, but basically that will bypass the cache and allow us to see updates that we publish instantly onto our website. And we don't need to look at any of the other options there apart from the purge cache. If you've published a change to your website and you're not seeing it updated, you can just purge individual files or all of the cache on the website. So purge everything. That will remove everything from the cache and you can guarantee that all of your visitors will see the latest updates. So it's as simple as that to add caching to your website. That's it, we're done. There's no configuration. Cloudflare handles everything for us. Next up, what I want to add is HTTPS or secure socket layers to our site. And to do that, we need to go to the Crypto tab here. And then you need to ensure that the SSL setting here is set to flexible. And what that does is allow people to access your domain name on HTTPS rather than HTTP. So there are different options here. It's very complex. We're not going to go into full details here. All you need to know is if you're just getting started, choose the flexible option and your site is then accessible over HTTPS. It can take a while for these settings to be updated. However, if you check back within a day or so, you will be able to access your domain name over HTTPS now. So as I say, there's no setup, it's all simple, it's all handled by Cloudflare. We now have HTTPS and caching on our website. Simple as that. However, there are a couple of other features of Cloudflare that I want to touch on very quickly, such as the speed setting. Here we can ensure that all of our assets are auto-minified. So what that means is it will take CSS, JavaScript and HTML and compress that down to the smallest size that it possibly can. And the reason why this is good is because it will mean that the file sizes that the user needs to download is smaller, and therefore your site will load faster for them. So we should definitely check these options and ensure that everything is being minified for us by Cloudflare. Next, there is the Rocket Loader, and that can improve load times for pages that include JavaScript. Now the default is off because this is currently in beta. However, I would suggest that you set it to automatic. If you find that things aren't working, then you can change this back to off. However, as I say, the Rocket Loader will improve the load time of your pages that have JavaScript on. So again, recommended that you set that to automatic. And that's it for the speed settings. This is basically just giving us a little speed boost, making sure we're cached, making sure everything is minified. So that's all we are going to look at on Cloudflare now. There are plenty of other features that are useful, however it's beyond the scope of this video tutorial. So let's move on, but before we do that we'll go to the Crypto tab and see if that certificate has activated, and yes it has. So we should now be able to go to our domain name under HTTPS. So let's go and verify that. Yeah, and there you can see that I have typed in https://rapidweaverseo.com and we are serving that over HTTPS. So perfect. We've now got caching, we've got HTTPS, and we've minified the assets via the speed settings here. So next up, let's have a look at how we can measure the site's performance and perhaps reduce the overall weight of the pages so that our pages can download faster for our visitors. So to do that, we're going to use the web developer tools inside of Safari. You can open those up by right-clicking and choose Inspect Element, or you can go to the Develop menu and Show Web Inspector. And once you've done that, if you go to the network page and do a refresh, this will show you all of the resources that have needed to be downloaded for this page. And at the top here, you'll see the weight of the page is 1.06 megabytes, and here is the amount of time it took to download, so 1.78 seconds. Because we're using a template-based system, some of these assets are going to be outside of our control. However, we can perhaps reduce the sizes of the banner images or the images on the page, and they could be compressed a little bit better, especially if you haven't used a tool such as Image Optim or the Mac app called Crush, which reduces the sizes of JPEGs and PNGs, or JPEG Mini, which is also a Mac app that reduces the sizes of JPEGs. So it all depends on the images that you're using on your site, but you definitely need to make sure that they are sized correctly and they are compressed. But getting back to the Web Inspector tools here, we can sort by the size and see what the largest resources are on our page. And the biggest resource is 300 kilobytes for the banner.jpg image here. So as we can see, it's the banner image that's going in behind here. And if we go and look at that under the Resources tab, we can go to Images and Banner. And if we open up the sidebar here, you can see the dimensions and again the file size. So there's not too much more I can do with this banner image. I've already set the dimensions at the optimal size for this theme, and I have already compressed this image using the apps that I've just mentioned. So I can't actually reduce the size of this image any further without making it blurry or pixelated in the background. Because things like this are a bit of a way up, you need to ensure that you get the lowest file size, but you also want your site to look good and professional. And as I say, I've already reduced the size of this image and the dimensions to what I feel is the lowest file size that I possibly could. And again, I've already done that for the coffee shop image here that's in the main content area. Again, I've resized that down and I have minified it as well. So I can't do too much more with those. However, as I say, if you haven't done that, make sure that the image is sized correctly and make sure that you are compressing those images using an app such as ImageOptim or JPEG Mini or Crush. Okay, next up we can have a look at the consolidated.css file. Now this is pretty much all of the CSS required for this page to work. And what RapidWeaver does is take all of the different CSS files that are required by the theme you're using. So that's things like the theme options have different CSS files. If you've added any custom CSS, and it takes all of the base CSS for the theme and it puts it all into one file and compresses that down. Now this file doesn't look compressed simply because we have the pretty print option enabled here. So if we remove that, or if we turn that off, you'll see that this file is actually compressed. So what this is doing is making the file size as small as possible. And if you remember, on Cloudflare we ensured that these files were being minified as well. So this CSS file is actually as small as we could possibly make it, and it's coming in at 216 kilobytes. So it's fairly large, but again, this is as small as I could make it for the theme that I've chosen to use. If the theme you're using, if it's coming in at 300, 400, 500 kilobytes, you might want to consider using another theme or looking at how you could reduce some of the additional CSS that you're using. Okay, the next largest asset is the jQuery file. If you're not using jQuery on your page, you should look at removing that. Some of the themes add it by default. If there is an option to remove that, or if you know how to remove it from your page and you know you're not using jQuery, I would definitely recommend making sure that that isn't loaded on any pages that don't require it. Okay, and basically those rules go for the remaining assets on your page. Try and reduce them as much as possible, ensure that they're minified, ensure that you've compressed them down as far as possible, and ensure that the assets that are being loaded on this page are actually being used. Don't make your visitors download an asset that isn't required for that page. Okay, that just about does it for the network tab. I would encourage you to learn a little bit more about these web developer tools in Safari. It's not something we're going to cover in this series. However, do spend some time, make yourself familiar with them, and you will be able to tweak your website's performance a little bit more easily if you know your way around these tools. Because there are things such as the timeline setting that will, if you refresh the page, show you the order in which all of the assets are being loaded, and it will actually show you which parts were blocking the rendering of the page, how long they took, when the download started, stuff like that. So this is a really powerful tool to know which parts of your site are slowing things down. Okay, so next up we're going to look at webpagetest.org. And what this does is, as it says right at the top here, test a website's performance. So let's go and do that by entering our URL into the Analytical Review tab. And then you can choose a test location. It'll pick one for you, or you can choose one closer to you. So I'm going to choose the London one, and you can choose a different browser. We'll leave it at Chrome. There are some advanced settings such as the connection speed. So you can test how fast does my site load on a mobile 3G network. Stuff like that. We'll leave it on the cable network for now. You can run multiple tests and so on. I'll leave you to have a look at those advanced settings. We'll just do the basics for now. So if we start the test, and what happens here is there are other people wanting to test their websites. So we are waiting for 4 other tests to complete before our one pops up. So I'll wait for that to happen and jump back in once our test has been completed. So our test has been completed here, and we will get an overview at the top, and we are getting an A for the first byte time, so how quickly the how quickly the server returns the first bit of information. We got A for the keep alive time, A for the compress transfer. We're getting an F for compress images. So that's something that I definitely want to look at, because I believed that I had already compressed the images on my website, so we'll need to take a look at that. Next, we're getting a C for the cache static content, and we're getting a tick for the effective use of a CDN. So that's a content delivery network. So let's go down and have a look at these actual results in a bit more detail. So here we can see the first view, the load time for our site was 2.1 seconds. So not too bad. Ideally you want to get that as close to 1 second as possible. However, 2.1, it's pretty good. It's not that long. Most people will be more than happy to wait for the entire page to load in 2 seconds. However, when we look at the repeat view, we're down to 0.4 seconds. So that is brilliant. That's perfect. The load time under half a second, that's really good for a website like this. And here what we can do is we get a waterfall in the same way that I showed you with the timelines on the web inspector in Safari. You'll basically get these same details here. It will show you what started to load first, when things were loading, how long things took to load, stuff like that. And again, the same for the repeat view. Then you can get a content breakdown of the requests, for example. So 6 requests for CSS files, that's the most amount of requests. We could look at reducing that down, try and get as few requests as possible. And that is because the fewer times that the browser needs to go and request more files from your server, the better. Because quite simply, the fewer times that the browser has to ask for more information, the quicker it can download everything. So there's 6 CSS files. I'd try and reduce that down if you can. Images, there's only 3, not too bad. Depends on what your site design looks like. Font requests, there's 4 font requests. So again, I would try and look at reducing that. Maybe we shouldn't be using quite so many custom fonts. We could go with some built-in system fonts to reduce those amount of requests down there. And then on the other side here, there's the actual bytes. So how much data is being taken up by each type of asset. So the images here, we can see 70% of our page is being made up of image requests. So that's a huge chunk of our page is just on images. So we should definitely look at reducing that down. Even though I said earlier that I tried to make those images as small as possible, we might just need to make those smaller and do something more drastic with them to reduce down the size of all those image assets, because 70% of our site is just for the images. Next, 13% is for fonts. So again, we could look at removing those custom fonts, just using the standard system fonts or the web safe fonts if you like. And then the rest of our assets is perfectly fine. CSS is only 4%, JavaScript 5%. That's perfectly fine. First thing I would look at doing is reducing down the amount of images that we're serving, or the size of the images that we're using on our website. So next I want to look at these compressed images, because it seems like we aren't actually compressing them. So let's go and have a look at a bit more details there. Here we can see we have 535 kilobytes of images, so nearly half a megabyte, or just over half a megabyte of images being loaded on our page. And they aren't actually compressed, even though I thought that I'd already done that. So doing tests like these actually shows you, real life here, I've forgotten to compress those images, and this test is saying, whoops, you need to compress those images. So let's go and do that together now, because as you can see here, both of the banner image and the coffee shop images aren't being compressed. So we can get savings of 164 kilobytes and 115 kilobytes. So a total of nearly 300 kilobytes in savings. So how do we go about compressing those images? Well, as I mentioned earlier in the video, we can use an app such as Image Optim to do this. So let's go and download that now together. So I'm going to do a Google search for Image Optim. And we'll go onto their website and download. It's a free download. and we will go and open that up. So all we need to do is drag our images onto here and they will be automatically compressed for us. So if we go and open our project up inside of RapidWeaver, and the images that we want to compress is the banner image here in the background and this coffee shop image here. So what I'm going to do is just go and locate those original assets on my machine, and then we can start working with those and drag them back into RapidWeaver. This is just to show you the full process of how you should be working with your images. Okay, so I've copied my original banner and nice cafe image to the desktop here, and if we open that up in preview, I can show you the information, and here you can see it's 1080 by 720. So if possible, you should resize that down. However, for the theme I'm using, the recommended dimensions were 1080 by 720. So I'm going to have to leave that as it is. And if we look at the cafe picture here, again, that's 1020 by 574. We could possibly reduce that down in width because we're not really at 1020 here. If we inspect this and have a look at the actual size, let's have a look what the width is here. So it's actually 530 pixels wide at the moment. However, if you think about your responsiveness of your site, as you get smaller, that image might take up the full width of your page, and therefore you might need it to be wider than 530, which was the size at the desktop. So it all depends on the design of your website. However, I know that I said that I'd already resized this so that it was the correct size, and that would be true because I wanted to serve this image under Retina dimensions. So those would be double the size that it's actually being displayed at. And doing Retina graphics is one way to create very large images for your site. If you're not worried about Retina, you can just do them at the standard size, so 530. However, if you want your images to be displayed crisply on Retina devices, which is pretty much all mobile phones and a lot of desktop machines these days, then you'll want to be doing it at twice the size that is required for the actual web page. So you'll need to make a judgment there whether you want to serve it up as a standard 1x image or you want to go with a Retina image, so twice the size. We'll leave ours at 1020 because that is basically a Retina size for our website. However, what we do need to do with both of these images is make sure that they are being compressed in Image Optim. So let's go back to Image Optim and drag both of these images into there. And there you can see we have saved 2.8% and 2.7%. You can try JPEG Mini and Crush, the two other apps that I mentioned. You might get a little bit more savings. It all depends on the image, so give those a try as well. However, we know that these images are definitely compressed now, so we can go back to our RapidWeaver project and replace the images that are there with these new ones. So let's just drag this nice cafe image back into here. And when we replace the image, we need to make sure that the image name and alt tag is being set, and yes, Stacks has saved that for us for that image, so we don't need to worry. So then next we need to make sure that under the general settings we replace our banner image with the new compressed image, like so. And then what we need to do is publish those changes up to our server. And once that's published, then we can go back and see if there's any other improvements on the web page test that we need to make, because we've now compressed our images. And let's just have a look at the detail. Let's just have a look at the other details here. We're 100 out of 100 for the first ones. We've done the images. Leverage browser caching of static assets. So we've got a few assets here that aren't being cached correctly. And the first one is actually, I believe that is a Cloudflare setting, so we can't control that. The next one is the fonts.google API. So this is where the theme is loading two separate font files directly from Google. we cannot set the caching details for those assets. Those are controlled by Google, so there's nothing we can actually do about these to improve the browser caching of assets there. So other than those, we are caching everything. So we're doing pretty well. 77 out of 100 is a pretty good score, especially when you're using a template-based website builder such as RapidWeaver. Some things are outside of your control. All you can do is make what is under your control as good as it possibly can be. And I think, as you can see from these results, we're doing pretty well there. So let's have a look through a couple of the other tabs here and see if there's anything else we could improve on. Let's have a look at the content breakdown. So here we've already discussed this. We've reduced the image sizes down as much as we possibly could. And as I mentioned before, you could perhaps think about removing those custom fonts from Google. That would reduce the total size of your website as well. Other than that, I think we're looking pretty good. If we go back to the summary, ideally what you'd want is everything up here to be an A. So we've got 3 out of 5 as an A, that's not too bad. And then the caching the static content, as I say, most of those issues there are outside of our control because we're using a template-based website builder. So we're doing pretty well. A C isn't a bad score. And then with the compressing images, we've looked at how we can compress those down. So if we were to rerun this test, we should start to see that score improving. Okay, so the web page test is quite detailed and there's a lot to take in there, I know. However, I just want to show you one more tool that can help you analyze your site and increase your page loading speed. And that is Google PageSpeed Insights. So let's just go and search for PageSpeed Insights and it will come up there. And what we can do here is just simply enter our URL and Google will give us some insights on how we could improve this page. So let's put in our rapidweaverseo.com domain and add the www correctly. And what this will do is analyze the speed and the user experience and give you some tips on how you can improve both of those. And that will do that for both mobile and desktop. They show you mobile by default because they know that mobile is the way forward. You need to be focusing on the mobile platform more than desktop these days, especially if you're thinking about the future. More and more people are using mobiles. So here we've got 71 out of 100. That is pretty good. There's just a couple of issues. Again, the main one is to optimize the images. So here we can see that the exported logo small could save 14.6 kilobytes. So again, that's the logo here. We should be looking at optimizing that image and then we might be getting a higher score. I'm not going to go through that again. I'll allow you to look through the issues that are listed for your website here and fix each one of those as good as you possibly can. And here we've got a should fix. So this is something we definitely should fix for our site. Again, because we're using a template-based website builder, a lot of these things are out of our control. So all of these fonts that are being loaded from Google, that is something that is set within the theme. We don't have as much control of that. You could try, as I've already said a couple of times, removing those fonts from the theme and you'll get rid of all of these warnings. Next, there is the Font Awesome CSS being loaded from the Bootstrap CDN. So this is some icons within a font file. So an icon such as this menu, 3 lines for the menu here, that's being loaded from Font Awesome. Again, it all depends on your theme and the design. Maybe you could remove that if you're not using any Font Awesome icons and this warning would be removed. However, in the real world you need some fonts and this is one of the most practical ways to add them to your website. And then there is a couple more where we should be optimizing the delivery of these 2 CSS files. Again, this is outside your control as a website builder within RapidWeaver, so we'll have to just leave them as they are for now. But as I say, you should go through all of the fixes for your website and try and fix as many of them as possible to get your score as close to 100 as you possibly can. So that is the mobile score, 71 out of 100. And if we look on the desktop, we're 86 out of 100. So again, we're doing pretty well. And I believe to get a green score on Google you need to get over 80. So they consider our website to be pretty good. We're green on the desktop, so we don't have that many issues that we need to fix. Most of these, or all of these, are likely to be the same as on the mobile. So there we go. Okay, so that does it for this lesson. We've added HTTPS, caching, minification, and we've looked at a couple of tools to help you improve the loading speed of your site.